It's very important that they continue some level of growth. But to put it in context, the second largest economy in the world growing at 6.5% is a very important accomplishment. It was lower than expectations, despite that boost in exports that one might expect when tariffs are being threatened or being scheduled. So I think that they will have to continue to monitor the sentiment in both markets as well as on the street in China to make sure they're delivering growth and opportunity for the Chinese citizens, but not being seen as backing down in the face of international pressure on the trade front.
We saw that export number go up almost 12% in the third quarter. How much have exports been insulated by this American rush to order and get products in before the full impact of the tariffs becomes felt?
That's a huge part of it. As your correspondent indicated, what we're hearing on the ground from manufacturers across China is that they were rushing to get orders on ships and into ports as quickly as possible. So watch that export number going forward and watch Beijing's response in the coming weeks. It's interesting that they would be pointing people back towards the stock market. This is something they did with tremendous effect during 2015, and that can provide a pretty solid rally as it did in the past in domestic stocks.
It could. I mean, they had also gotten the national team, quote unquote, national team to get in on the action and buy stocks. Do you think that they've been active and that we are seeing this, 30% decline from January highs in spite of, or has the national team not been deployed yet?
I think the national team has not been deployed yet. I think that they've been holding off to wait to see what was going to happen on the trade front. I think we're going to get clarity on that after the midterms, and we're going to get a little bit more insight into what the rest of the year looks like. Once Beijing flips that switch of enthusiasm for equities and enthusiasm for growth, they do have $4 trillion of foreign reserves at their disposal, and also a very compliant population that's willing to go along with them if certain initiatives need to be focused on to drive economic growth and stability. So Beijing has a lot of arrows in its quiver. I think they've been holding off on using them for now.
So, David, I hear that rhetoric, that rallying cry to buy stocks, and I say to myself, if that were the case, they could just make a deal with the United States and their market would go up to 25% it's down. I read that as they're going to dig in, and they're not all inclined to make a deal with President Trump. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think the American perspective forgets about the century of humiliation and the history of China dealing with foreign trade powers. I don't think Xi, who has his own domestic political considerations to think about, can really afford to be seen as blinking in the face of this pressure. I think they're more likely to extend credit and growth to other trading partners and to spend at home, to spend down some of the foreign reserves that they have in order to stimulate the economy, of which they still control many of the levers: banking, 40% of production, and a very compliant group of citizens and employees that they can turn to when they need to.
So I'm curious, we're hearing from the White House that they're getting a bunch of no's when they make specific asks on this trade war front. If this isn't the impetus for China to come to the table with true intentions, what would be?
I think if 2019 turned into having a further downgrade of their expectations, the IMF just brought down GDP growth for 2019 to 6.2%. I think that might turn towards Beijing's attention, but I'm not sure it would turn to having Beijing capitulate on a wide variety of trade measures. I think they'll turn more internally and spend more money at home.
So how good do you think the Chinese numbers are? Do you believe them?
I do believe them. They're corroborated by numbers that we're getting from all their trading partners around the region and around the world. So I think the GDP number is one we can believe. There's some other sets of data that are tough to believe in China, but GDP is something that's so correlated, so connected with other activities around the world. We can triangulate that is pretty accurate.